KETV Newswatch 7, chronicling the stories impacting our community. Stories making a difference. Stories that matter to you. This is KETV Newswatch 7's Chronicle.
We are a nation at war. You will be on the front lines.
That was Nebraska Senator Deb Fischer at the end of last year as 50 men and women from the 155th Air National Guard prepared for deployment to the Middle East. Now, President Obama is asking Congress for permission to take on ISIS, and he promises it won't lead to another ground war.
Our coalition is on the offensive. ISIL is on the defensive, and ISIL is going to lose.
I'm not sure that the strategy that's been outlined will accomplish the mission the President says he wants to accomplish.
Good morning and welcome to KETV Newswatch 7's Chronicle. War is just one of the major issues facing our nation, and joining me this morning to discuss them is Nebraska's senior senator, Republican Deb Fischer. Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Rob.
And you've been in Nebraska now for a week. What are Nebraskans telling you about the war powers that the president's asking for?
Nebraskans are very, very worried about what's happening in the world. You and I talked earlier, and I told you when I was doing my town halls all across the state last summer in August, I heard that from Nebraskans. It was the first time that I really heard that interest in foreign affairs. Usually people are concerned about jobs and the economy, their families, but there's definitely a focus on what's going on in the world. Nebraskans are informed. They know what's going on, and this is just a continuation of that now, with the President offering that AUMF to Congress and looking for feedback now from Congress to address this situation we're faced with.
Right, and on the Senate Armed Services Committee, you've been reviewing that AUMF, the Authorization for Military Force. What have you found?
We will be having public hearings on it. I believe that's very important. 2 other committees will be having hearings as well, the Foreign Affairs Committee and the Intelligence Committee. What I'm looking for is an end game, a strategy from the President, from the administration. We need to understand what that end goal is going to be if we're going to commit young men and women from this country to continue to fight in that area. It's very, very important that we understand what the strategy is. It's not my job to micromanage what the Commander-in-Chief does. It is my job to have oversight and provide the resources that the Commander-in-Chief needs, but he needs to explain to us what he needs. He needs to explain it to Congress. But more importantly, he has to get this message out to the American people so that the American people know why we are fighting.
Now, you said on PBS recently that specifically building a 3-year expiration date into the request is unwise. And you also intimated that if the generals and advisors in the region suggested to the president that, hey, we need ground troops, that maybe he should listen to them. Some people may argue exactly the opposite, that we should not have boots on the ground, so to speak, at any cost. How do you explain it to them?
We have boots on the ground right now. We have 3,000 Americans in Iraq. We have about 1,500 in Syria. They are not on the front lines, but they're in harm's way. We need to be honest with people on where we're at here. And again, we have to look at that end game. What is our goal for the region? The President earlier said that we needed to oust Assad. He's still there. That was another red line in the sand. He's still there. If we defeat ISIL in the area, who moves in to take over that land area that they now control? Are we looking at a unified Iraq that is now really basically partitioned into 3 areas? Is that the goal the United States is looking at? And my greatest fear around the world, my greatest fear is Iran and their ambitions, not just in that area, but in the world as well. I need to hear from the administration what their plans are. I don't need details. I don't need the basic battle plan. I need to know what the goal is. What are we trying to do? I believe we have to stand up to ISIL. I believe we have to take them on. They are well financed. They are well trained. They are an army. They are a force. They know how to use social media to grow their ranks. We need to take them on. Are we going to do it in Iraq? Are we going to do it in Syria? Are we going to do it in Northern Africa? where they are now as well? Or are we going to wait and have to face them in the homeland?
Degrade them or destroy them?
I think they need to be destroyed. You know, a plan that the President is looking at is that we train moderates in Syria and equip them, and they fight for us on the ground. That isn't a short-term strategy, because it's going to take years to be able to train the numbers that we will need to take on the ISIL force. But at least it's a plan that's out there. My questions are, and you've heard it from other senators as well, when we train these moderates and they go back to their communities, to their homes, to their families, are they going to fight ISIL, or are they truly going to fight their enemy, who they view as Assad? There are so many questions there. I always say this is multi-layered. It's not a black and white, easy response. But I am asking the President to give us a goal that he is working for, beyond the fact that we need to destroy and degrade.
Let me ask you about, you and Senator Ben Sasse co-sponsored a resolution welcoming Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to a joint session of Congress. Some House Democrats right now are circulating a letter saying, hey, we want to push this off, this visit. They say that Netanyahu is being used as a political tool against the Obama administration because the elections in Israel are coming up. They want to postpone his visit till after the election. Netanyahu will most likely ask for tougher sanctions against Iran over a nuclear program. President Obama, of course, has threatened to veto any of those changes in sanctions. Your thoughts on everything happening with Benjamin Netanyahu coming? Is he a political tool against the Obama administration?
No. I think the Prime Minister of Israel has proved to us over and over again that he is a friend and our most valued ally. The country of Israel is the only democracy in that area. I think it is very, very important for the Prime Minister to speak to a joint session of Congress, to tell us what he knows, that he has intimate knowledge with regards to Iran. Iran keeps me up at night, and he needs to express that to Congress, and again, more importantly, the American people need to hear what he has to say.
Are you concerned that maybe America's relationship with Israel has slipped in the last 6-7 years?
I hope not. I hope not. I know there's tension there, but as I said, they have been steadfast allies of ours, as we have been with them. They are the only true democracy in that region. They are a strong, strong force for stability in that region, and we need to remain their friends and show that we are a true friend of Israel, and we will be there for them.
Talking about other nations, Cuba, easing of economic sanctions. Pro, against?
Cuba hasn't promised to ease anything with regards to their human rights violations for their own people, to open up their country, to provide for more freedoms for their own people in return for the United States easing sanctions. I would like us to see head in that direction. I think that's very important. Sanctions are a good tool. Diplomacy is a good tool. But we should not be afraid to be strong when we set sanctions up, and we shouldn't be afraid to enforce them in order to get something in return. I don't think we're getting anything in return, and more importantly, the people of Cuba are not getting anything in return for this easing of sanctions. Of course, Nebraska has a trading partnership with Cuba that's very important. We don't want to lose that. It's been developed over Governor Heinemann's tenure in the mansion. We don't want to lose that or put that in jeopardy. But we need to demand more. You know, we can go back and look at Iran and the deal that the administration's trying to put together with Iran now. You know, I've been told that Iran started here, the United States started here on negotiations, and this has been the movement. That's not a deal. That's not a deal when you're the only one giving. That's not a compromise when you're the only one giving. So I have very real fears on what kind of deal, what kind of negotiation we're going to end up with in Iran. And I think it plays a big part in how we're behaving in Syria as well.
Let me talk immigration for a moment. Senate debating funding of Homeland Security, as you know, obviously. Homeland Security, for everybody else, that oversees the immigration enforcement. Some Republicans want to include language in the funding that basically would reverse the president's executive order on immigration. President Obama says he'd veto that if that language was included. Is that a deal breaker for you?
Well, the president has said he's going to veto about 11 different issues that he hasn't seen any legislation on yet, except Keystone. Right. I'm kind of amazed by that. We don't do that in Nebraska either. Usually you see how the process goes, you look at the amendments, you read the final bill that's been passed before you make any kind of statement if you're going to veto it or not. It's not a deal breaker for me. We need to be able to work as a Congress. Hopefully we're going to work across the aisle. I think the judge's decision in Texas with regards to the administration's very real overreach with their executive action could be a game changer here, and we'll be able to move forward and fund the Department of Homeland Security. I haven't heard anyone say they want to shut down the government. You know, we hear that all the time. Oh, gee, you know, Republicans want to shut down the government. You know, folks, I certainly don't want to shut down the government, and I haven't heard any of my colleagues say they want to either. We're going to get this settled. We're going to fund the agency.
You mentioned Keystone. You voted for the bill, passed 62-38. If the president vetoes it, as promised, you'd need 67 votes to override. Okay. Where are you now? Is there any chance of getting enough to override?
I don't believe we'll get 67 votes. We'll have 63 votes. I think for the override, that's a decision the president makes. This is just one more step in that long process we've had with Keystone. You know, I live in the Nebraska Sandhills. I live over the Oklala Aquifer. The proposed route goes through my former legislative district. I've been dealing with this issue for 6 years. The majority of Nebraskans support it. The majority of the people in my area support it. What I want to see happen is the president make a decision. He still has to do that whether he vetoes this bill or not. He has to make a decision on how this moves forward. He has to approve or disapprove it. He needs to do his job and do that. People want this uncertainty to end.
Okay. Well, we're going to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to chat about things like the Affordable Care Act, the recent deadline, and also an encounter Senator Fischer had with an EPA air administrator during a hearing this month. You're watching KETV News Watch 7's Chronicle.
Would you commit to me that when you are contacted by our public utilities in Nebraska or state government in Nebraska, that you will respond to their concerns and let me know that you have done so?
I can certainly commit that we will converse with anybody who calls us from Nebraska, and we'll certainly keep you up to date on those conversations. And to the extent that we've already had those, we'll be sure to give you information about that.
Okay. I think you'll be getting a lot of calls.
That was Nebraska Senator Deb Fischer going toe-to-toe with an EPA administrator over new rules regarding carbon dioxide emissions. Welcome back. Joining us this morning on KETV News Watch 7 Chronicle is Senator Deb Fischer. Any feedback, Senator, from that encounter?
I don't believe our office has heard anything from Ms. McCabe. That seems to be par for the course when it comes to the EPA. The regulations with the EPA, whether it's through the emissions, which you know, our public power in Nebraska is very concerned about, whether it's water of the United States, I mean, we have a huge, broad coalition that's fighting that. Not just ag people, but home builders and cities and counties, very, very worried about what's going to happen with waters of the U.S. We don't get a lot of feedback, so we'll keep questioning and go toe-to-toe. You know, people sometimes they say, you know, you're too nice, and in Nebraska we have manners. But people also say, we know when you've got that edge in your voice and you've got that steel in your spine, and they look at you and they're going, okay, now we better get to work here. But it's been tough. It's been very tough with the EPA.
You mentioned Waters of the United States, and that's part of the Clean Water Act. Now, there's been a large coalition who actually has said basically that Clean Water Act is to clarify protection for streams and wetlands. You see it more than that?
I see it as a move, a most definite move by the federal government to take state water. In Nebraska, our groundwater, our surface water belongs to the people of Nebraska. And I don't want to see the federal government putting on more regulations, adding more cost to a resource that we are blessed to have in this state, and that I believe we manage very, very well here, right here in the state.
Do you think it's going to hurt our economy and prevent future job growth if we start going along this route?
Most definitely. You know, whether it's with Waters of the U.S. or whether it's with the emission standards, you know, we're public power. We have to pay for any upgrades to our coal-fired electric plants. As consumers, our electric bills go up. When we build roads and you have water in the borrow pits there, in the ditches, as you're building in a road, or the county's repairing a culvert and you have water standing, that's Waters of the United States. That adds to the cost of road building. When you build a home and you have water standing, that adds to the cost of your home. This has such rippling effects that it's going to impact everyone here in the state of Nebraska. Both of these proposed rule changes will have, I believe, a damaging effect, will be very costly for individual Nebraskans. That's why you see a broad coalition across the board fighting these.
Talk about rippling effect, health care. We've reported on the failure of one of the insurers, Co-Opportunity Health. You've said you're pushing for answers into what happened. And are you running into roadblocks into that, or what have you heard?
We hear different things. I'm working with Senator Grassley and Senator Joni Ernst from Iowa on this. The three of us signed a letter hoping to look for answers. I think this is another example of the federal government having this vision of being able to set up a co-op for this area that would provide insurance for people. We had no experience, was not funded properly. It was set up to take care of about 12,000 people, and it had 10 times that number sign up. There was no doubt that this was going to fail. Some of the reasons that have been put out there I would question. I think that as we move through this process, we'll find out what the real answers are. Senator Grassley and Senator Ernst and I, our main concern is looking at the people who had policies with Co-Opportunity and making sure that they will be taken care of, that they will be covered. And that is our concern. That is how we are going to move forward, is to take care of our constituents on this.
You've also said that you're going to continue fighting for repeal of the Affordable Care Act. Would anything, I mean, there's a lot of people who say repeal is probably not going to happen. Some reorganization is probably more likely. Would anything less than a total repeal be seen as a failure by you?
Well, I am working to repeal it. It will be difficult. It takes 60 votes in the Senate, and it would take the President to sign it. I'm realistic about the chances on that. But I don't believe the federal government should be involved in health care. I have heard from thousands of Nebraskans who have lost their insurance, who have lost their doctors, who have seen their premiums go up, who have lost their choice. That's not what we need. We need to take care of people. We need to have accessibility and affordability with insurance. My goal is to express principles that I hold, which I did in the campaign, which Republicans have done, to put out plans on what we will need to do. I think the first opportunity, again, where we're going to have this discussion is in the Supreme Court case with King v. Burwell. And if the subsidies go away, then we have to address these 5 million people who are receiving subsidies and the effect that this will have on them. We have to make sure that they are still going to be taken care of. You can't just end it. You can't just end it and say, well, you guys figure it out. We need to make sure these people are taken care of in the short term, and then be able to present a coherent plan laid out with principles that we're going to have health care that is patient-centered, and be able to provide that to meet the needs of Nebraskans and Americans.
Okay. Well, we're going to be back with some final thoughts. First, I want to remind you that your comments are an important part of the show. If you want to be heard, a couple ways you can do it. You can call us directly, 402-978-8960. Use your comments on the air. You can also email us. Go to KETV.com, click on the Chronicle link. Love to hear from you. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching KETV News Watch 7's Chronicle. This morning we have been talking with Nebraska Senator Deb Fischer, and just a couple minutes left. Tell me, what's your #1 priority this session?
You know, I have a number of priorities. They tie in, I believe, to the responsibilities of government. I am chair of a subcommittee on emerging threats on armed services. National defense, national security, of course, is #1 priority. I also am a chair on the surface transportation subcommittee on the Commerce Committee. Infrastructure, so very important to our country. We need to look at innovation. We need to look at job creation. We need to look at keeping our families and our communities strong. So those are the areas that I'm working on to be able to accomplish that. We, of course, have to be able to take on those unfunded mandates. I hear that from Nebraskans all the time, as well as taking on the regulations that are really don't have much common sense to them anymore. So we'll take on that as well to make sure that we can have a strong economy and strong families.
What's the dynamic like in Washington now from your viewpoint now that the Republicans are in control of both houses?
It's fun to be working. It's fun to be working in a legislative process. Republicans and Democrats get to have amendments now. You know, my first 2 years, I wasn't allowed amendments by Harry Reid. We had more amendments voted on the Keystone XL pipeline bill than we had all of last year. So we have a process that's slow in the Senate. Takes a while to get anything done. But at least we're able to vote on amendments. We're able to talk about amendments, work with our colleagues, build some trust. So then, you know, we're going to be able to reach across the aisle more and get things done. That's my goal as a senator, to be able to do that. Because unless we reach across the aisle, we won't have the votes to get done what we want. So you have to work with everybody. You have to develop those relationships. I've been really proud of what I've been able to do in the last 2 years, and I think we're only going to go forward from here.
So what is your message then to Nebraskans? You come back, you said about every week, but so like in 30 seconds, what do you want to tell Nebraskans?
I want to tell Nebraskans to stay informed, stay interested, and stay involved. I listen to my constituents. You know, I said I'm here, especially in the metro area and Lincoln area, every weekend. I live 300 miles away. We don't get home too often, so this is kind of home now. We're here in this area, and it's so important to hear what Nebraskans think and what they want to see us do. I'm hopeful that we have a process in the United States Senate, that we have a form of government in this country that will continue to allow us to build a much, much brighter future for our people. I'm optimistic.
Well, Senator Fischer, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thank
I have to have you back. We have so much we can talk about.
Yeah.
Well, if you've missed part of today's show or you want to watch it online, of course, you can always do it at KETV.com. I'm Rob McCartney. You've been watching KETV News Watch 7's Chronicle. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you back here again next Sunday.
Great.
Thanks again.